All right, Joe, you better watch out. We'll put you on a committee. It can happen. All right, Joe Dubin is a Nashville native who went to McGavock High School, graduating a year before The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, went there. Joe said, hey, he was only there for 6 weeks, but we claim him as an alumnus, as you should.
Yes.
As you should. Joe played football at Samford University before graduating from MTSU in 1997. And he went to 9 spring breaks in that time, a record he thinks will never be broken. I am impressed. We are in the presence of greatness right here. Joe started working for WKRN in August of 1996 before going to ESPN Radio and finally to WSMV. In that time, Joe was nominated 20 times for an Emmy, winning 3. Yes, absolutely. Ever humble. Joe says, before I get too proud, that's batting a 150 average. So he says to please remind him of that when he feels like he's important, which you are. On July 1st, Joe started working with Main Street Nashville, where he's been writing a weekly column for the past couple of years. Please like his Facebook page because the more likes he gets, the more publicity, which leads to more paying gigs, unlike this one, because, you know, the fried chicken's about it. That's all we got to offer. His daughter is getting married in November, and he will not see a single dime of said money that comes in for that. So there you go. Please welcome Joe on the go, Joe Dubin.
Thank you. Thank you, Amelia. I've got nothing left to say. So enjoy your meal and thanks for inviting me down. First, I got to take a picture to let my boss know that I'm actually working today. So everybody can smile back there for me. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. I really, 2 weeks ago, I spoke at the Vanderbilt Kiwanis Club. We had 9 people there, and I'm not kidding you. I was able to put 2 of them asleep. So hopefully we do a lot better today. I asked that day when I was speaking to Vanderbilt, and I said, what do you want to hear? How I got to Channel 4 or why I left Channel 4? They all wanted to hear the dirt from Channel 4. So I didn't give it to them. But so we're going to lead it to how I got to where I am here today. So like Amelia said, I went to college, had a great time in college. I had actually, it was my freshman year, I had the academic counselor came to me at Samford and says, we need to talk. And I was like, oh, we do? And she said, we have a problem with your grades. You have a 1.25. And I was like, wow, how in the heck did I get a 1.25? But back then, as Chris, you remember, you just had to pass hours. There was not really a GPA that you had to get. So I passed my hours, but my 1.25 was not letting me partake in intramurals and everything else. Anyway, I had a great time in college, by the way. So I came back to town and I got a job. I was bartending, and then I got a job working at a credit card company out in Dixon. And I just, I need to do something with my life. I was kind of a nomad traveling around. And I ended up selling this Goodwill account. It was a huge deal for the company, Goodwill across America. And I sold those little check cashing equipment. You put a check in and it zips around and comes back around. See if you've got money. I don't know. To this day, I don't know what that machine did. But I sold it, and my boss said, hey, we had a big party the next day. And it was in Dixon. And I went to the bathroom and I'm washing my hands, and I looked in the mirror and I saw myself at 60 years old. This is 1995. I saw myself at 60 years old doing the same job and being that guy who goes to the bar and sits at the end of the bar and talks about the good old days. And I was scared to death. So I walked back in to my boss. I said, hey, I'm not feeling good. I need to take a few days off. He's like, take a week off. I'll see the commission check. You're good to go. On the way back, so my mother worked in West Nashville. I was in Dixon. And I said, I got to go back to college and get my degree. I've got to get my degree because I don't like where I'm headed to. So I got in the car, I had a car phone. I called Samford. I say, I need you to send my transcripts to my mom's office. I go to my mom. I say, Mom, I'm quitting my job. She's like, what do you mean you're quitting your job? I said, I'm going to load trucks. I'm going to work midnight, 11 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to go to MTSU. This all happened within a matter of an hour. My transcripts come in. So I said, I'm going to drive to Murfreesboro. I'm going to register for school. Again, 1st of November, 1995. I drove to Murfreesboro. I had no idea that this was the last day you could sign up for spring semester. No idea. I did no research. I showed up at 4:02 at Alumni Hall, wherever you get your admissions, and they were locking the door. And I went in and I said, hey, I said, please. And the lady's like, hey, I'm sorry. And then I'm seeing it's the last day. And I said, you got to let me in. You have to let me in. And she said, I'm sorry, we're closed. And I used the Lou Holtz line. One time Lou Holtz was checking into a hotel in Atlanta, and the guy said, hey, we're full of, there's no rooms here tonight. And Lou Holtz said, let me ask you this. If the president of the United States was coming to this hotel right now, would you have a room? And the lady said, well, absolutely. Lou Holtz said, give me that room. So my thing was, I said, if the president was going to register for school, and the lady's like trying to figure it all together, I said, would you let him in? You know, and she's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, come on in, we'll figure it out. So I went in and I filled it and I sent it into I put it in. And then a week later, I was enrolled in school at MTSU. And I wrote about this often. You know, I'm going back to school. I'm 27 years old. I'm going back to school and I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know what I'm not going to do. And that's party every single night. I'm not going to do that. So my first day, I go to class and it had snowed and there was ice. And at the time they were doing the construction on Murphy Center. So there was a lot of ice behind Murphy Center, behind the football stadium. And I fell. And in real time, I probably fell in about 3 seconds. But in my mind, it took me about 15 minutes to fall. So I was slipping and sliding and I fell on my face. First day of school. And then, and it was funny, everybody was kind of standing back like, what's going to happen? And one guy helped me up. And at that moment, I knew in my life that I was good. And I told somebody that, and they're like, what do you mean? You just fell on your face? You're 27 years old. You're loading trucks at night, making $9. How do you know you were good? And I said, you know, I fell on my face, but I fell forward. I fell forward. You know, I'm going forward in my life. And to where I've been 2 months ago, I'm enrolled in college. I mean, this is not bad. He's like, God, I wish I could think like that. I'm like, it's not that hard to think that way. So I ended up taking 67 hours, spring, summer, fall, spring. I had an internship at Channel 2 and I graduated from MTSU. And it's funny, it was a conversation. I'm going to write about this in a few weeks because it always comes back to me every time I think about MTSU. We're at the rec center one day. I was about 2 weeks away from graduating. And there was a guy, he was 35 years old, enrolled in school, was going to drop out. And I said, we're playing basketball. I'm like, why are you going to drop out of school for here? I mean, it's great. I mean, he's like, well, by the time I graduate and what I want to do, I'm going to be 39 years old. And I said, let me ask you this. You plan on being 39, don't you? He's like, well, yeah. I mean, I said, so what's your problem? And it just hit him. You know, and I had never heard that line before. I just like, here, I was in the same situation you were at a great university. It's offering this chance to further your life. And a couple years later, he graduated. So there's a lot that MTSU means to me as far as coming back because they gave me my second chance at life and to get my degree, which I proudly display in my office and home. And I tell everybody that I'm a proud, everybody's like, well, you went to Sanford. No, I'm a proud MTSU graduate. That's where I went. And that's where it gave me the second chance at my life. So when I was there, I was able to intern at Channel 2 and it just took off from there. I had a $6 an hour job editing the noon show, getting yelled at by people. I'm like, this is great. Then I worked at a healthcare company at night. Fast forward, that healthcare company at night was AIM Healthcare. And when I started, there were 8 employees. And the guy said, I want you to come work with me. I'm like, man, I just went through 2 years to get my degree working in TV. I appreciate it, but I kind of like the TV way. That company 3 years ago was sold to a German company for about $800 million. And the 8 people that started, there were only 4 that started when things got going. And they made well over, well, you can kind of put them at millions. But I remember my brother's like, do you regret quitting that job? I'm like, I don't, not at all, because I can't predict the future. I can only predict what I'm doing today and I go out and do. So I always cherish working in TV of thinking that I never wanted an 8 to 5 job. So I didn't get an 8 to 5 job. I worked in TV. And it's crazy because we got 9/11 coming up. And a moment I'll never forget was 9/11 was the day working. I was a cameraman and I'm watching TV. I'm watching actually the Rugrats with my daughter. She was 3 years old at the time. And a friend of mine calls and says, are you watching this on TV? I'm like, no. He's like, Planes at the World Trade Center. And I turn it over there, and because we're all just like, oh my goodness, what's going on? I'll never forget my daughter tapping me on the shoulder, and she said, Daddy, where'd the Rugrats go? And I'm thinking, man, here's my world, and here's the 3-year-old world. So we put on the Rugrats. I remember telling her, I said, I'll see you in a few days. And then I worked for like 5 days straight. And it was, because you remember we got all these calls around town for anthrax was happening. So we just worked nonstop, crews are going everywhere. I'll never forget, but we provided a good service that day for the community, because the people informed and what's going on. And a year before that, I'll never forget, was the election, Gore and Bush. And we were with Gore at Lowe's Vanderbilt Plaza Hotel, and it was midnight, and they gathered the media, and there was like a 45-car motorcade, and we were like the 43rd car, and we're going down Charlotte Avenue to the Legislative Plaza. I'll never forget, car stops, and like, what's going on? Guy in the car says, well, these things only stop for major reasons. I'm like, well, please tell me what's going on. We didn't know. We had no idea that the Florida election had not been called. I say that because here I am, a guy 5 years earlier, did not know what he was going to do in life. And I'm working at a credit card company. And now I'm in the middle of this great moment, at least in my eyes, of American history. And a lot of that was because of what I learned at MTSU, and got me the confidence and knowing I could do a job, and got there. And so it was great. So there's a lot of things in my life that indirectly go to MTSU. So I did the Big Joe thing. It's a whole other story to get into how I did that. I was doing this stuff at work. At the time I worked at Channel 2, we had the Titans preseason games. And we do these awful promos of the game, like Titans versus the Bears, Saturday at 6. So I kept writing proposals to our guy that did all the creative services guy. I get all these scripts to him, probably 50 of them. And he was like, hey, we'll do it eventually. So finally he said, you know what, we're going to do one of these commercials that you've written just so you'll stop writing them. I said, perfect. So we did a takeoff on the Blair Witch Project. I was a Jaguar player, and I had a camera in my face. So it gets nominated for a national award. It never happened before. Channel 2 never got nominated for this award. We didn't win it. It's called the Alpha Award. But after all that came down, the boss said, from now on, you get to write all the promotion for football and the commercials. I said, fantastic. We won that award 2 years later. And I tell people, it's a thing where, working or doing anything, you'll get told no repeatedly. And I'll tell schools this when I go talk to high schools or colleges. I said, my thing was, I kept knocking on a door, right? And there's that old parable, we keep knocking on the door, and finally the homeowner comes down and opens the door and says, the only reason I'm opening this door is that you won't stop knocking. And I tell kids all the time, never stop knocking on the door. Never stop knocking on the door. And in fact, this morning, I was reading something where Sylvester Stallone visited his old apartment. It's on his Instagram today. Visited his Hollywood apartment when he first moved to LA. And he said, in that room, in that window is where I wrote Rocky, where everybody said, don't do it. Nobody cares. You won't get anywhere. He goes, but I just kept punching. My thing is, you just keep knocking on the door. Just keep knocking on the door. So I get the Big Joe thing going at Channel 2. We're having a lot of fun. And then one day at Channel 2, my boss calls me and says, hey, I need you to do sports this weekend. The entire sports department just quit. I was like, what? He's like, I need you to do sport. This was June and July of 2006. And I said, man, I don't want to do that. He said, I need you. I'll make it up to you. So that was the week the World Cup was playing. So I just went and treated it like a big Saturday Night Live skit. There was these countries that USA was playing I'd never heard of. I made up a map. Like, I can't identify this country. GM loved it. That's how I got into sports. So I stayed in sports for a while. And then I ended up going to ESPN Radio here in town. And then Channel 4 called me, and I ended up being at Channel 4. And I was there for about 6.5 years for my newest endeavor. And so with the whole world of sports and news, and I left and I did the Big Joe thing there at Channel 4 too. And that was fun. My thing was getting out into the community and telling stories and having fun with people. And a moment that I won't forget is when my boss came to me, who my blood pressure will rise. He said, how do you want to do these COVID stories going forward? And I said, I'd like to go and I'd like to tell positive stories of people who are like fighting it and who are there. And the first story we did was the deli here in Murfreesboro called Delmonico's. Former MTSU quarterback, has the deli, great food. He said, they had double mortgaged his house. The first 2 months were great, and the pandemic hits. And his wife was pregnant, and he had 2 other kids. And he said, I don't know what we're going to do. And the look of fear on his face. And I remember telling him, I said, look, we're going to help get the good word, help you out, get the word out. Maybe somebody will come buy a few sandwiches and we'll do all that. So we did the segment, positive. People rallied. There's a law firm in Nashville that came down and bought a bunch of sandwiches from him because they saw his story. So I wanted to tell these stories of positivity during COVID. And so when all that happened, my boss said, hey, that's great, a positive story, but people really don't care. And I said, I disagree with these. That sounds good, but nobody wants to see it. It's not real life, not real world. I said, well, I disagree. And Kent's probably laughing over there. And I said, I see it every day. I see these stories there. Why can't we tell these stories every day? He's again, people don't care. I said, well, I disagree. So we ended up telling these great stories of positivity. And I went back to a thing my son had to do in 4th grade. He had an assignment after school one day. His assignment was to count all the red cars that we saw that afternoon, every red car. I said, all right, he said, Dad, let's count all the red cars. He's like, there's a red car, and there's a red car. And so I took this story years later, which is a few months ago, and I'm thinking, one guy doesn't care about the positive stories, but telling me there's not a lot of them out there. But you know what? Like the count of the red cars, I went and found these, they're everywhere. You find positive stories. So I search for the red car. I search for positive stories to see great stories and great people and the struggle, how they're coming together, the community's helping them out. And they're everywhere. So when I always tell my son, so we're going to count the red cars today. He's like, well, there's a lot of bad going on. We're going to count the red cars. We're going to see the good today. There's a lot of good happening out there. So this leads into my transition from leaving Channel 4. So I'm fighting this every day of what am I going to do, tell these stories, and yet I'm getting no support back there. And my favorite moment was there's a golf tournament. Simmons Bank Open came to town. It was out in Franklin, got postponed in 2020, came back. And it was one of the first big, huge events that wasn't football, basketball, or baseball for the community. And I went out, and I so hope he's watching my old boss on this Zoom right now, because this is something else. I do the story, and he says, we got to talk about your story. Come in here tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, this will be great. So anytime you get called in the boss's office, it's going to be something you're going to remember forever. He said, I'm so disappointed at your story today. Yesterday, I'm so disappointed. Nobody cares about that. I'm like, well, again, it's, these volunteers are coming together. It's a golf tournament. People are coming to Middle Tennessee. They're spending money. He's like, our demographic, you need to go out there and figure out what a 35 to 50-year-old woman wants. And I said, say that again? He's like, you need to figure out what a 35 to 50-year-old woman wants. And I said, I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but I'm a 52-year-old male. He said, I know that, but you got to figure out what they want. Our demographic is a 35 to 50-year-old woman who's divorced with 2 kids. And I was like, you understand that? And I said, you know what? I said, you know what a 35 to 50-year-old woman with 2 kids and divorced, you know what she wants right now?
A happy story.
She wants a break. And he's leaning back. He's like, how do you figure that? I said, because I was raised by that woman. And I know she's not sitting at home watching morning television saying to herself, that's an awful story. I can't believe you're doing that story today. And then I knew that it was time to get out of working in television. I knew then that I needed to go to a place that still covers stories, held people accountable, but every day it wasn't, hey, all stories we're going to do today are all negative. And I just couldn't do that, And so I got Main Street Media, and the moment, actually another Murfreesboro story, I was getting my oil changed at Nelson Mazda. I went across the street and was eating a Baja Burrito. And I was in there, and a lady comes up to me, very sweet lady, and says, I don't mean to bother you, but are you Big Joe? And I said, yes, ma'am. How can I help you? She said, you wrote a story a few weeks ago about your belt breaking. I wrote a story, my belt had broke, right? It's like, who cares? Well, my belt breaks, and I'm thinking, gosh, when did I buy this belt? And I bought the belt the day my son graduated pre-K, which is like, yay, pre-K. 20 years ago, nobody cared. Now it's the biggest thing, right? So it was a great thing. So I bought the belt that day. A month later, my mother dies. Fast forward 10 years later, my daughter graduates nursing school. And the day after she graduates nursing school, that belt breaks. And I couldn't throw it away. I couldn't. I mean, it's a belt that's broken. I could not throw the belt away because I said, you know what? That belt has carried me for the last 10 years. It's been everywhere. I mean, that simple black leather belt has been everywhere with me. I couldn't throw it away. She said, this lady said, I read your article. My husband passed away last year and I can't get rid of his shoes. And my kids say, I got to get rid of his shoes. And they said, Mom, you got to get rid of the shoes. And I can't get rid of the shoes. And your article told me that it's okay to keep the shoes. And I said, you're absolutely right. Keep those shoes. She's like, there's shoes in there that he wore to the hospital when our kids were born. And she told me the whole story. And where she's talking, I said, man, you can never get rid of those shoes. No matter what, never get rid of them. And like, I never get rid of that belt. So in TV, you tell positive, but there was this lady who came up to me in the middle of nowhere, Baja Burrito, over here in Murfreesboro, who told me this story. And then I knew I'd made the right decision to leave and to tell stories and think positive in the world. And that's what it is. But it all started back when I was here at MTSU. It all started taking that leap of faith and doing something that nobody thought. Everybody, you're stupid. Why are you going back to school for? You're too old. You can't get it done. I mean, you don't know anybody. You got to work. I mean, I was working full time at overnight trucking, loading trucks from 11 at night to 7 o'clock in the morning. I'd get in my 1982 VW Cabriolet, praying to God it didn't break down on 24, getting me here at MTSU every day of the week. And it did, and I just went on faith and got it done. And that's what I tell people all the time. And that story, so people are like, oh, we want the dirt of why you left Channel 4. Well, that's it. I mean, there you go. And that's why people are now searching it out. I got my phone here. I can search out positive stories. If I don't see a story on the news about MTSU football, I can go find it. I can go find MTSU football story. I can do whatever I want. So it's changing, but somebody's got to feed the content out there and make it positive, or just feed the beast, which we call it. I was working in TV. So I prefer to feed the beast, but in a positive way that let's just take something away from that. I know we're here talking football and all that stuff, but I will tell you a great story with Rick Stockstill, who I absolutely think is one of the finest men on planet Earth. We'd come up here. We'd been in the morning. We'd cover the Titans practice. And as a cameraman, you can't do anything. You 5 minutes of practice, turn your camera off, you can shoot this, and then we're done. So you pretty much got 10 minutes of nothing. So that day I come up to MTSU, and they're having a scrimmage on a Saturday, a week before the season started. And I told Coach Stocks, I said, hey, I said, what can we do? He's like, listen, I don't give a damn what you do, just don't get hit. So I was like, so we're in the middle of the field, dude. I mean, it was so, I always remember that how gracious he was to all of us to come up there and cover the football team. So it was always a pleasure to come down here to go where you're wanted. And that leads into places you go where you're wanted and the people that you like. It was always a pleasure to come down here. I tell people I'd come down here 100 times before I'd go to a Tennessee Titans football game. I'd come to MTSU practice before I'd go to a Titans football game. I'd go to a high school football game on a Friday night before I'd go to a Titans practice, just because we're wanted. So I tell people, find where you're wanted in life and enjoy it, take care of each other, and have fun that way. And it's a very simple story. And again, it all goes back to MTSU. Falling on my face behind Floyd Stadium and nobody helping me up, and then people looking at me. But it was all right. I knew then everything was good because I had fallen forward. So that's it. There you go. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is this the Q&A portion of the show? Anybody? Yes, sir.
This is more of a comment.
Yeah.
To the question, you have great, what I call candid camera style video on your YouTube channel. Can you share this, especially if you were downtown Nashville?
Yeah. Well, if you go back, we all remember Candid Camera, Alan Funt. I mean, it's funny, those things are timeless. And those hidden cameras and funny bits on the street, well, if you look throughout the last 25 years, they've gotten cruel. They've not really funny, and they're mean, they're putting people down. So I worked a drive-through at McDonald's for an hour with a hidden camera, and people were fantastic. You know, I told them that here's your Big Mac. I ate half of it. Don't worry about it. Here's your shake. There's no whipped cream because I licked it all off. And people were fantastic. They just laughed the whole time. Nobody said, take it back. I remember one lady, I said, what did you order? She's like, I ordered 6 nuggets. I said, I got 4 for you. She's like, 4? I said, I ate 2 just to make sure they were good. She's like, oh, were they good? I'm like, yeah, they're good. Don't worry about it. So then we went downtown. So the first time I went downtown, I did a story I had was talking to people about the heat. And I had my guitar and I was sitting on a bench. Nobody would talk to me because they thought I was homeless. Not a soul would talk to me. So I said, this next time, I'm going to take a map of downtown Nashville and I'm going to stand in front of the Ryman and ask people where the Ryman is. And it was fantastic because there are some people like, I don't know where it is. And some are like, well, it should be, oh, there it is behind you. I'm like, oh, I'm from out of town. I don't know. And we spent hours and people were great. So they like to have fun and like to, I think people look for humor. You know, people want to see humor these days. It's something that's not derogatory or putting people down or arguing or other stuff like that. So it was a lot of fun. Thanks for noticing that. Appreciate it. Yeah, somebody else hand back there in the back. Yes. You sure? Yeah.
It sounds like me, right?
Right. And that's what I told, you know, as well. I keep pointing to Ken because he does some stuff at Channel 4. And one of the best things that Channel 4 did was getting him to come on and talk about elections. You know, you get a consultant who lives 500 miles away who's telling you what you should think about in town. And it was always bad, 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 bad. And I'm like, I don't want, nobody ever went to me when I was out doing a story and said, you know what, Joe, if you could do a few more awful car crash stories, that'd make me feel really, nobody's ever said that. So a consultant who drives that into the brain of a news director, general manager, I don't understand that thinking. I don't understand. And this is something else too, to bosses who move here. And I've written this before, like Oracle and Amazon. When you move here, get involved in the community. My boss at Channel 4 could not tell you, and I had the argument with him, could not tell you where Mount Juliet is or Gallatin, yet he's sending me out on stories there. He had no idea where those places are and had no idea why he sent me it because the consultant said, you got to get out of the community. He couldn't tell you where Murfreesboro is. And I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding with you to get there. And I'm like, how do you not know these? Nashville is more than Nashville. You go outside Davidson County, there's a whole beautiful, wonderful world that exists out here. And you got to see it. And then, in fact, we're not being able to come out here and tell those stories was just awful. So that's the thing where I like where I am now is I can tell these stories and nobody was watching my segments live. And it was all on the phone or Facebook. They would search it out. So if you're going to search out, why not search out good stuff? That's like, oh, I didn't know that was going on, or that's happening, or I love that story there. That's the stuff you got to find out about. So, and the whole demographic of 35 to 50-year-old women, well, then, you know, that same boss told Forrest Sanders, who's an MTSU graduate, the finest storyteller I've ever seen in my life. He said, stop telling stories on old people. Nobody cares. And he said, what do you consider old? He's like, anybody 50 and older, nobody cares. It's like, what are you talking about? So Forrest left. They let him walk. Now he works for Scripps Howard on the national scale doing stories. Fantastic storyteller who we all work together at Channel 4 and they let him go. I don't understand letting people go who are doing such fantastic work, really inspiring the community. This guy won 21 Emmys in 3 years. 21. And they just don't I mean, I'm lucky to get 3 and I've lost 17 times. And I know the process. It's not easy to win these. And he won 21 of them. And they let him walk out the door because he said his stories were too focused on old people. I was like, where are you guys going? I would love to be boss of a TV station because I know the stories to tell and where to go and what to do. There's more people out there that want to see this good stuff. And now they do a thing now where it's like, here's the positive side of news. Well, after you've told me 18 negative stories, thanks for the one positive story before you go back to more 18 negative stories. Sorry, my blood pressure's up. I apologize. I'm sorry. He is gone. He's actually his day. He is gone. And that's what I said about people who came in and he wrecked the news department. And people like that always fall up. Does that make sense? He got promoted to another station. And I want to write the station and say, do you know what you've got? But I'm like, you know what? The good Lord's saying, let him go. And that good Lord sends in your head, always listen to that. Because I think it's the Holy Spirit saying you need to just, yeah. So anyway, there's good news, positive news, search the good. As I tell my son, we're going to count the red cards. There you go. Thank you.
They took him away.
Joe, I don't know if you remember, but you're really talking to a retired college dean. So when I hear a story of a 1.2 GPA and the success, we celebrate your genius, but also your determination and your resilience.
Thank you.
So we have a certificate
Oh,
as a
yeah.
speaker in your honor, but also we have a certificate in your honor related to a contribution being made to end polio globally. Thank you
Fantastic.
so
Thank
much,
you.
Joe.
Thank you.
So appreciate
Thank you.
Now, if that doesn't give you
What does that pay? By the way?
You get 2 pieces.
double of what you got when you arrived. Now, if that doesn't give you anything to celebrate, we have Patience and Stacy to remind you this week, and in light of all that we've been able to overcome, what do we have to celebrate this week? Could you all stand? Oh, you all want to come up to the mic so our Zoom community can understand what we're celebrating. Thank you, Lisa Nolan.
So-
What were you saying?
I've been so stressed about the pancake committee and what we're gonna do and I
Did
think I
you-
need more herbs.
Did you know August 29th was more herb day, less salt day? So make sure to eat more-
De-stress.
de-stress
with
with the herb. You know what I'm saying?
And
August 30th, if you don't like the less salt, it's marshmallow day. So eat a marshmallow.
like the Ghostbusters did.
Yeah.
when They blew up the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Today is National Eat Outside Day.
Not likely.
A weatherman picked this
I
day for
agree.
National Eat Outside
I
Day.
agree. And August 31st is National Trail Mix Day. Eat your berries and nuts.
I'm more of a steak girl.
I believe it. And then September 4th is International Bacon Day. Poor Wilbur. Charlotte's Web. Okay. And then we had nothing for the last one. September 4th is World Beer Day, and we're both glad that we don't celebrate it nor have it. So,
Right,
all right.
right. That's
Go
a prank. It's a
celebrate.
prank day.
Yes.
Thank you today. This has been an exciting time here at Murfreesboro Rotary. We thank each of you for your presence as well as the Zoom participants. And remember that we have canceled our meeting for September 7th. That is the day that the club will be closed, but we will reconvene the second Tuesday in September. Thank you. Go in love, go in peace, and go in unity.